I'd like to begin first by finding out a little bit about you all here. Are there any folks here who have actually lived overseas or been overseas and worked amongst Muslims anywhere? All right. Where was that?
You've already got the offer of all. What about the Muslims?
The Muslims where? Yes, they're the same stock as the Middle Easterners in their basic beliefs. No difference there in Indonesia. In fact, Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world. And where was your work with Muslims? Hang on. All right, well, that's something we'll be getting into as we go along. Yes. In Guam. Muslims there. Okay. Well, Muslims are everywhere in the world today. And here in the United States, there are a lot of Muslims. We'll be talking about Islam in North America in a seminar this afternoon, if you're interested in that. But this is the Muslim creed. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet. And that's the point from which all Muslims begin, and that unifies Islam. And I want to begin this seminar on answering Muslims' objections or misunderstandings of Christianity by first talking about some of our misunderstandings of Muslims. And because of our time constraints, I'm going to put up different things on the overheads. I'm not going to mention everything on it. You can read it and think about some of the issues that are raised there. But I will mention a few of these things. Islam is not just a religion, but it's a total way of life for the Muslim. Everything that he does from the time that he is born until he dies is related to Islam. His father whispers in his ear the moment that he is born the Muslim creed that we just looked at. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet. And throughout all of his life, he hears that over and over again. 5 times a day, he's supposed to go and to pray. And he hears the call from the mosque that God is great, to come and to pray to Allah. And so all of his life, the foods that he eats, the way that he dresses, the way that he washes during the day, everything his total life is connected to Islam. So this is a great challenge for us as Christians. We say that Christianity is the center of our life. We say that Christianity controls everything that we do as Christians. Christ is a center for us. The Scriptures are our guide. How seriously do we really take that? Here these Muslims take that very seriously. And it's something that as you deal with Muslims, as you talk with Muslims, you have to realize that you're not just touching them in one point of their life in terms of a philosophy or an idea or some religious thing. But when you touch them in terms of Islam and you try to present Christ to them, you're touching their whole life, their whole community, their whole security, their whole family relationship. All of these areas are bound up in their beliefs and in Islam. So keep that in mind. And this is one of the reasons why Islam has been so resistant to the gospel and to Christian mission. Second issue you need to understand in terms of yourself when you're dealing with Muslims is your own attitude towards Muslims. When you hear the word Islam, when you hear the word Muslim, what do you think? Well, most people, particularly in America, they think of terrorism. They think of terrorists. And this is the picture of the Muslim that we see on television. Someone holding up a gun, running around, or waving his arms in the air. Some fanatical person bombing innocent people. This is the picture that we get, the stereotype of the Muslim fanatic. But let me ask you a question. With which of these two groups now do you associate yourself? Okay. Here is the man, he calls himself a Muslim, and he is portrayed on television as this fanatic, as this bomber, as this terrorist. And he's, quote-unquote, a Muslim. And over here we have another man he calls himself a Christian. He lives in Waco, Texas. And he has a group of people in his home that he's brought in there and he's teaching. And on the same day, last Sunday of February, 2 years ago, or 3 years ago maybe, it keeps getting further and further back as I keep getting older. On the same day that the New York Trade Center was bombed by quote-unquote Muslim terrorists in New York City, David Koresh was in Waco, Texas, under siege by the FBI and the ATF. Now, which one of these two are you going to associate with? The Muslim or the Christian? Well, you'd probably say neither one. I'm not a Muslim, and I certainly don't want to be associated with these fanatical Christians. People call themselves Christians over here. Well, these are both stereotypes, and both equally false. And so this is the mentality, this is the attitude, this is the situation that we have to understand about ourselves when we think about the Muslim and when we start talking about Islam. We have to put away these stereotypes. Most Muslims in the world today live in places where it's very difficult to raise a family, to work, to earn a living. They are in third world countries. They are in underdeveloped countries. They are in areas of the United States in the inner cities where it's very difficult. And yet they are very hard-working people. They are very family-orientated people. They are, most of them, their main objective is just to go out each day to earn a living, to put food on the table for their families. They are very high moral people. You go into many of the inner cities of the United States where the Muslim community has developed, they have pushed out the drug lords. They have pushed out a lot of the crime. And they've done a lot of good things. And we need to give them credit for that. So our own attitude toward Muslims, and many of the stereotypes that we have towards Muslims, we need to rethink. And as we think about approaching them with the gospel and dealing with some of their problems and some of their objections, first thing we have to think about is our own attitude toward the Muslim and how we look at him and how we think about him. And it will go a long way in the way that we present the gospel to him and the way that we deal with some of his problems. So you can read through this and think about these things. Remember that these are people for whom Christ died, and this is the motive behind our going to them and seeking to bring the gospel to them. And these are important points to remember as we approach the Muslim. Any question about that?
Number 7 there, we said it's the only religion that's definitely anti-Christian. It's cool.
Yeah, okay. Islam is the one major world religion that has come since Christianity, and it's dated to 622, the time of Muhammad. And in the teachings of Islam, the main central things we're going to see later on here is their denial of Jesus Christ, denial of his death and resurrection and so forth. And so it's a specific anti-Christian doctrine. There are many other religions which worship other gods or accept some things from Christianity and other things, and Hinduism, Buddhism, all of these things are definitely non-Christian. But they're not specifically targeted against what Christianity taught. Right? They have their own teachings and they would stand alone by themselves. But when Islam came, Satan, we could say, if we want to put it in that category, saw what God had done on the cross, saw the salvation that he provided in Jesus Christ, and then specifically designed Islam to be the opposite of that and to attack that. And so this is sort of the idea there. And there are many books that have developed that idea. And some of these writings I mentioned at the beginning in the books there, they talk about that and develop that idea further. Okay. One more point here before we go on specifically to talk about the Muslims. One more thing about ourselves here to help to give us a perspective again. And that is to ask ourselves not only how we look at the Muslim, but how does the Muslim look at us? How does the Muslim look at the Christian? And you might look at it in terms and ask yourself, well, how do you look at the Jewish people and Jewish evangelism? You think it's good we should go out and evangelize Jewish people? Do you think that they follow a false religion? Do you feel like maybe it's not a false religion per se, maybe it's just incomplete? And they had some truth there, but they didn't follow on. And they believed God's revelation in the Old Testament, but they didn't follow that through to his revelation in the New Testament and the coming of the Messiah and Jesus Christ. And, maybe that's the way we sort of think about Jewish people. Good people, a true religion, but God has done more since that time. Well, this is exactly some of the things that the Muslim will say to you. Judaism was for a certain period of time. It was true, given by God, Allah. And then we have the New Testament. We have Jesus Christ, one of the great prophets, true man of God, true teaching of God. And that was for a time. But now Islam has come. See, God has done more. So why don't you accept Muhammad? Why don't you accept God's final prophet, God's final revelation? You see, you've only come 2/3 of the way. Well, see, many of the same approaches you might take towards a Jewish person in trying to bring him from the Old Testament on into Jesus Christ as your Messiah, as his Messiah. The Muslim would take similar kind of approaches to trying to bring you through from the New Testament on to accepting God's final revelation, the Quran. So this is how they look at Christians, people of the book they call them, God-fearing people, good people, but just, they got stuck and they need to be pushed on. So, some of the issues there, and they look at Christianity as lacking some of the things that they find in Islam.
You were just remarking on how Muslims think of Christians as God-fearing people and I know that in many of the early writings of Muhammad.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it true that in his later writings that he became very Christian-oriented, that he started calling us, the devil or whatever, but just going very...
He became very angry at the Jews because the Jews would not accept him as a true prophet. And he became very angry at the Jews. And originally, when Islam was formed, they all prayed toward Jerusalem. But then when Muhammad became very angry at the Jews rejected him as a true prophet. He put a tax on them if they wanted to continue to live in the Muslim cities and all. And they had to pay a tax. And then he changed the direction of prayer from Jerusalem to Mecca. And now, he never came out as strongly against Christians. Christians also he put a tax on for them to have to live in the Muslim cities and all. But they still had fairly good relationships because the Muslims, or the Christians at that time actually were not very strong Christians anyway. They had wandered far away from biblical Christianity into many other strange teachings in what we would say today is the Orthodox Christianity and in Catholicism and things like that. But his main problem with the Christians was that he wanted them to acknowledge him as a true prophet in the line of the prophets, and they would not do that.
Dr. Romain, Dr. Walter Martin in his book spoke of Islam as not necessarily a cult, but as another world religion, and that was versus Christianity rather than against Christianity. Can you respond to that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's more of a world religion than a cult. There's a difference by definition, that a cult supposedly is a religion based on Christianity, a false religion based out of Christianity. Islam is another world religion with its own leader. If to say it's anti-Christian or to say it's a religion that opposes Christianity or versus Christianity, to me is almost a matter of just the semantics. I don't know what difference he would make in what would be trying to say in calling it anti-Christian. Anti-Christian in the sense, not that they hate Christians, but anti-Christian in the sense that its teachings are opposed to Christianity directly. See, the main central teachings of Christianity that we're going to come to right now are the very things which Islam are central to Islam and its teachings. And this is what makes it opposite to Christianity. Yes?
Well, I don't know how much about it. I'm a little confused at this point. When you talk about anti-Christian, and then you look at the early days, and then maybe in later times it became more anti. And asking you to leave, and leave the country because obviously of your Christian beliefs and your work there. How is a Muslim today? Is a religion? Do they look upon Christians? I mean, I don't know about hate, but aren't they very much opposed to that in any of their countries? And they don't want you there, and they want to get you out, and they will take physical violence against.
Yeah, any country. Well, it's hard to make point-blank statements because there's so many different countries in the world. But let's say on face value that any country in the world which is dominated by Islam, has an Islamic government, where the majority of the people, are Muslim, they are not open to evangelism within their country or to evangelism of their people, and they don't look favorably towards missionaries coming to their countries to work. Now, if you want to come in as a doctor or as a teacher or some other way to provide some service for them, they'll welcome you. They're not going to keep all foreigners out of their country. But in many of the countries, the Muslim countries, it's not against the law to do evangelism, but it's frowned on very much because it's against their society and their core beliefs. And so you're causing problems for them. In many countries, Muslim countries, it is officially against the law for a Muslim to convert to any religion, whether it was to Christianity or to Buddhism or to anything, for them to convert. So they look at it as an insult to the Prophet, to Islam, for someone to leave Islam. And so it's not strictly anti-Christian, it's anti-anything else except Islam.
You could add that it's also viewed as treason. It's not just an insult to the religion, but it's also treason to the government.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know that point more.
Yeah, if it's a country where the government itself, like Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, whether is officially an Islamic state, well, if you're not Muslim and you were, if you're born there and you're not a Muslim by birth, then you fall into other categories. But if you've become a Muslim or you are a Muslim by birth because of your family and you convert, yeah, it's considered treason in many countries. There's a paper on the table I have downstairs that's put out by Zweimer. If you have a chance today, you pick it up and take it with you. It talks about two people in that paper. It's called the Zweimer Alert. One is a man named Ali in the Middle East. He's on trial this weekend. It's his second trial. His first trial, he was a Muslim who converted to Christianity. His first trial, he was accused of treason. He was accused of changing his religion. insulting the Prophet, insulting Islam, and was found guilty because he openly confessed himself as a Christian, and he was put in prison. Now he's having a second trial because his family has been taken away from him. He's been declared an unfit father because he's a Christian. And so he's on trial now to have his wife has opened this case against him, officially divorcing him and getting custody of his children and his family. And so these things have many ramifications as they go along. Second article in that little sheet is about a Filipino lady in a Muslim country in the Middle East. She was there working in a home as a maid of a rich sheikh, and she was raped. And in the course of her rape, she attacked this man and injured him. And now she is being put on trial for assaulting this man. And she had been tried and convicted and was convicted to 100 lashes. And so now she's waiting in prison for this to sentence to be carried out and so forth. And so we're trying to get people to write letters to the embassies of these countries, to President Clinton and to others, to try to intercede, to try to do something in these two cases. But these are just two cases. There are many, many others just like this, situations like this. And you can see how radical many of these ideas are in Islam and how seriously these people take these issues and how it affects them in many areas of their life. Now, as we come now to dealing with the questions and some of the issues, misunderstandings that Muslims have of Christianity, some of the questions that they will raise and throw out at you. Let me say first that sometimes answering the questions of Muslims is like chasing rabbits. You go into the home of your Muslim friend and you sit down and you're drinking tea or coffee and you're having a wonderful time. They're fantastic people. Hospitality is a core to their whole life and beliefs. And you're sitting there having a great time. And over in the corner of the room there's a bag. And it starts moving around and all. And all of a sudden a rabbit jumps out of the bag and starts running around the room. And your friend says to you, oh, help me catch my rabbit. And so you get up and you start running around, you try to catch this rabbit, and you just about got it, and another one jumps out of the bag and starts running around the room. And now you're chasing two rabbits around the room, and they're going on, and you get one, and you throw him back in the bag, and another one jumps out. Well, this is sort of the way it is sometimes when Muslims start asking you questions. If they can get what we would say in English, get your goat, or get you going somehow. You'll be going along, and he'll ask you a question, and he'll throw out this question or that question about some verse in the Bible maybe, or some issue, and you'll be going along, and you've got him just about pinned right in the corner, and you're ready to nail him on this one. And all of a sudden he'll say, well, wait a minute, I thought of something else a friend of mine told me last week. And it'll be totally off in another direction. Have nothing to do with what you've been talking about. And this happens over and over again. There was a young fellow I was working with for many years. He used to come over every week, and we'd have Bible study together. It was kind of it was a language lesson. I told him to come, for a language lesson, but we're doing our language lesson on a study of the Gospel of John. And we're going through this, and we're going along, and I really thought I had this guy ready. I mean, we've been going for weeks and weeks, and we were really good friends. I'd known him for a couple of years. And we were getting down. I was dealing with the question of who Jesus Christ was, and to get him to the point where he would see that Jesus Christ was really the Son of God. And I had him really backed up in the corner as I asked him some questions. The next question I had, he was going to have to say yes, the way it was going in the study. Well, what's he say? He says, wait a minute, I've got a question I want to ask you. I'm way out, in left field somewhere. Totally different subject, other problem of philosophy of, what did Aristotle mean when he said, who knows what it could have been, But, so this is one of the issues as you're dealing with it. Don't worry about trying to answer every question. Don't feel like, this is something you've got to do, that you're the only one that can do this, and you have to answer every question he raises. Because some of his questions aren't really serious questions. Some of the questions are just trying to get you going. So stick to the subject and stick to the main issues. And don't make fun of Islam or of Muhammad. We're not trying to attack other people. We're not trying to attack things that he holds dear and sacred. As issues come up, you're going to have to deal with them at the proper time, in the proper way. But there's a lot of positive things you can say about Muhammad and about Islam. And if you need to, sometimes you have to say a few positive things to whet their appetite. But don't start out right from the beginning, on the attack, because this will just drive them away and will put them on the attack, on the defense, and even more so, put up barriers between you and them. And remember, our aim is not to win an argument, but to win the person to Jesus Christ. Okay, usually the first question that comes up is the question of God. Okay, we're going to talk about God, the Bible, and Jesus Christ, and then we'll see how far else we can go, how much time we have. But those are the basic issues, those are the central issues, and those are the first things that always come up. And over again, when we were in the Middle East, Muslims would come up to you and they would ask you, do you believe in the Trinity? A Muslim came up to you and asked you, do you believe in the Trinity? What would you say? Yes or no? Yes? Too bad. Shouldn't say yes. You can't answer yes to that question when a Muslim asks you, do you believe in the Trinity? Because what does he mean? He means you believe in three gods. His definition of Trinity. See, it's a misunderstanding. He doesn't understand what is the Trinity. If you say yes, in his mind, you've just said, I believe in three gods. I believe in the Father and the Son. And of course, if there's a Father and a Son, there must be a Mother. Oh, okay, that's Mary. So you've told him that you believe in three gods. You believe in the Father, you believe in Jesus Christ the Son, and you believe that Mary is also God, the mother of Jesus Christ. And through physical intercourse between the father and the mother, we have a son. See, they look at it totally in a physical dimension. Their understanding of the Trinity and of Father, Son is a physical understanding and a physical dimension. Huh? So, yes?
Of course, Muhammad did write this in the Quran, describe the Trinity this way in the Quran. So when we explain to them that Muhammad, that this is not the Christian understanding, that should not just imply, but explicitly impugn Muhammad's understanding. How do they respond to that?
Okay, good point. All right, now a lot of these misunderstandings all arose from this very same point. The Christians that were in Arabia at the time of Muhammad. Muhammad was a man who was really seeking after God and searching after God. Very religious man. Right? But the people that he around him, that he had exposure to in his travels and all, were people that had very strange beliefs and ideas. They called themselves Christians. But, we would not certainly call them Christians today. And many of their beliefs were very strange, things that they had mixed in with Christianity. And they had no Bible in Arabic at that time, no scripture in Arabic at that time for Muhammad. And Muhammad could not read or write anyway. But he had no resource to go to. One of the things we have to remember as we look at all of these different misunderstandings that the Muslim has And you ask yourself, well, where did they get that idea from? Well, it's our fault in terms of, quote unquote, the Christian church in history. Because the Christian church that was there at that time in history, at the time of Muhammad, did not teach Muhammad true Christianity. And so he got all of these false ideas. And then you'll read in the Quran all of these crazy ideas, and you'll read a lot of errors in the Quran in terms of quotations of the Bible and understanding of Bible stories and Bible incidences and all. And where did these come from? Well, these are all things that were told to him by Christians. You know, and he picked them up by that, through the oral traditions and all at that time. So a lot of his misunderstandings of Christianity are really our fault in terms of church history. And he got these ideas. So their view of God, right? There is no God but God. Okay? Central. One God, only one God. This is the main underlying, the foundation teaching of Islam. So obviously, first problem they're going to have is the Trinity. Now, but when they ask you, do you believe in the Trinity, always ask them, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? In fact, that's a good question to ask them no matter what question they ask you. What do you mean by that? Before you answer them. Because you may be agreeing to something you don't agree to. You may be disagreeing to something you do agree to. Find out what he really means before you give a quick answer right back. Don't assume that he's thinking in the same terminology you are and that he's using words in the same way you are. Don't assume that. It's the first major mistake that we make. Remember that when they think of Trinity, they think mostly of a physical relationship. Muslims are often confused about Christians' view of the Trinity because, again, the fault of Christians and how the church has developed in church history. And you have Roman Catholics, and you have Protestants, and you have Orthodox, and you have all these different groups. And they don't really understand the differences between these groups and so forth. And a Muslim would ask me if I was a Christian, and I would say yes. I usually said yes to that question. That was general enough you could answer yes to. And then he would say, well, what kind are you? And I would say, I'm a Protestant. Oh, that's good. Oh, that's good. Because they knew Catholics and Protestants is basically all they knew. And the Catholics had all these statues and idols, and they burned candles and, these different things in their worship. And the only real difference they knew was that Protestants didn't do that. We didn't have pictures, and we didn't have idols and all. So, at least we were good in that sense. But other than that, they had no concept, no idea of what Christianity really was, except what their Muslim teachers had taught them, which were all these false understandings. Muslims will attack you. They say, well, the Trinity isn't really in the Bible. If this is somebody who's really studied something or something, not your ordinary man on the street. But they'll say, well, the word Trinity isn't even found in the Bible. I say, well, that's true. But the word unity, Tawhid in Arabic, isn't found in the Quran either. And this is the central teaching of Islam. God is one. But that word for one, Tawhid, unity, is never found in the Quran. And yet it's their central belief.
Why aren't they describing God as unity if it's only one God?
They would just say God is one, the number one. But this other Arabic word for absolute unity is never found in it. But that's the word that they use when they describe God in their conversation. So, it's not a big issue, but it's just a way to answer their objection to you. Well, this word's not even found in your Bible anyway. Why do you believe in it? Well, argument over words is something Paul said to stay away from.
How do you spell talent?
Okay, in English we would spell it Tawhid. Now, one of the things you have to be careful of with Islam and when you read books and all, things that they bring from Arabic to English. Like you'll see Muslim and Muslim, right? M-U-S-L-I-M or M-O-S-L-E-M. Well, it's because you're dealing from one language to another language and you're trying to keep the same sound when you bring the word over, and what letter are you going to pick to represent this letter, and it's not a big deal. It's just to bring the word. But you'll see Muslim and Muslim. You'll see Quran spelled with a K, O-R-A-N. You'll see Quran spelled K-U-R-A-N. No difference, just trying to keep the sound, and one writer prefers one over the other. And so don't let the transliteration of words from Arabic into English bother you as you're reading, and different authors choose different forms. Okay, let's keep moving on. You can spend a whole course on some of these issues. What about the Bible? What about the Bible? Bible is very central scripture, very important to us as Christians, very central to Christianity. If you're going to deal with a Muslim, you want to open your Bible, you want to quote a verse or something, and he'll say, wait a minute, hey, the Bible's been corrupted. The Bible's been changed. What's that to me? He says, how do you know what you're saying is true? And so they have this doctrine of the corruption of Scripture and the abrogation of Scripture in Islam. And it's one of the issues you'll have to deal with early on as you want to use the Scriptures. Now, keep using the Scriptures. No matter how he objects, no matter what he says, keep using them. Keep using them. Let him object all he wants, but keep using them. But understand where he's coming from and what he's thinking. Excuse me?
Did that concept come in the Quran, or is that developed later?
They find it in the Quran. Although Muhammad himself never actually said that the Bible was changed. Now, he did accuse the Jews of corrupting their scriptures, but not the written scriptures. He accused them of, when they spoke, not speaking truly from their scriptures. And so the Muslims have taken these verses where Muhammad chastised the Jews for not quoting their scriptures accurately, for not teaching them correctly, and saying, well, see here, they've been corrupted. But it wasn't the written word that he was accusing of being corrupted. It was their spoken word and their teaching from that word that he was accusing. But they have developed this whole doctrine out of those few scriptures. And there is a teaching in the Quran that actually refers to the Quran itself, which talks about the abrogation of Scripture. And some of the earlier things that Muhammad taught, he later on in his teaching changed. Like this idea of praying towards Jerusalem, and then later praying towards Mecca, and some other doctrines that developed. So when you read the Quran, the way most Qurans are put together, they're usually put together, the traditional style is the longest chapters first down to the shortest chapters, except the very first one, which is their main chapter and is a little short one with their blessing. But from then on, it's all the longest ones down to the shortest. So it's not in historical progression like our scriptures generally are in terms of history. And so they usually have an index if you want to read them in terms of the way they were revealed, and you can follow the index and jump around and find the chapters in the order they were revealed. But if you do that, it's a very interesting study to see how Islam changed even during Muhammad's lifetime, which is a whole other study. But we need to move on.
Just real quick, who wrote the Quran? Can you briefly tell us who wrote the Quran and whether Muhammad wrote it himself?
Well, Allah wrote the Quran. Allah wrote the Quran, obviously, and he dictated it through Gabriel to Muhammad. And Muhammad couldn't read or write. This is why the Quran is a miracle. And this is the great miracle that proves Islam is true and that Muhammad is a true prophet, is the fact that here you have a man who was totally illiterate and he produced this great piece of literature. But it was revealed to him, and the word Quran literally means to recite. And this is what the angel said to Muhammad. He said, recite. And Muhammad said, what shall I recite? And he just said, recite. And he dictated the Quran to Muhammad. Muhammad went back then and, having memorized it, recited it to his followers who memorized it. Remember, this was a time in history when people did a lot of teaching and so forth, just oral, and did a lot of memory. So it's no big deal to them that it was just oral. And then finally, it was recorded into writing after the death of Muhammad. As a lot of the people who had memorized the Quran, many of them have started to die off in war, and many of them started getting older. They said, we need to make a record of this book. And so they assigned a person to do that, and he gathered up all the pieces and bits of the Quran from all over the world on leaves and fig leaves and leather and this and that. It's a big story. And he put them all together and compiled the Quran.
Okay, when they said that the Bible been tampered with, they talk about in the original text, or they talk about the King James Version. I read a lot of stuff where they had debate with the, like Jim Swagner with Dr. D. They all talk about the original, the King James Version, but they never talk about in the Greek text or the
Right. Well, they'll talk about both. They'll say both. They'll say, your Bible's been corrupted. Look at all the different Bibles. You have over 400 different Bibles today. Which one's the true Bible? And you'll say, well, these are, translations. We have this one and that one, and we from the manuscripts, and we try to find the most accurate text. We put it together and so forth. So don't worry about the English and all. Let's look at the Greek and the Hebrew. So the Muslim will say, fine, okay, let's look at the Greek and the Hebrew. And they say, okay, well, where's the original Greek and Hebrew? And you say, well, we have all of these 600 Greek manuscripts, and we have this and that, and we, all these ones from different dates and so forth. And they say, okay, but which one is the original one? Well, we don't have the original manuscripts. Oh, see? You Christians, you don't even have the originals. So how do you know your Bible hasn't been corrupted? How do you know with all these different ones? You see, now the Quran, every Quran is the same. You see, every Quran, every country you go to is the same. And they don't even like it being translated. I mean, you want to read the Quran, they prefer you to learn Arabic and read it, because if you don't read it in Arabic, you're not really understanding it, because you can't really translate some of these concepts. I mean, you get into Bible translation, if you've done any of that, you know how difficult it is. And sometimes getting the exact understanding, that's why we have different translations. Because people have, there's a certain Greek word, well, what are we going to say for that in English? We don't really have that same word. How are we going to use that concept? What are we going to say? And we struggle with that. See? Well, they say, in Islam, same thing. We don't want it translated. Just keep it the original, keep it that. And now you can buy English ones, and you can buy French and German and whatever. But none of those the Muslim will acknowledge as an official, authorized, whatever you want to call it, Quran. They are understandings of the Quran, or they are interpretations of the Quran, or teachings of the Quran, or something named like this they will give it. But the Quran is only Arabic. Yes.
Obviously, Islam has folk Islam and true Islam. And the folk Islam is that you do the same argument with them about the Quran, what is the original Quran. Most Muslims I've talked to believe that they have an original Quran, but you produce evidence and scholars that they don't have the original Quran either. How do they deal with that in your dialogue?
Well, most of them don't deal with it so much as, they've been just taught one thing. See, Muslims aren't taught to examine and to study and to do textual criticism, or to, they're taught to learn by rote. They're taught just listen and learn. Don't ask questions. Don't argue. It's cut and dry thing. Right? And this is what God said. That's it. Don't ask me any questions. And so in dealing with them sometimes on textual issues and all, unless the person is, really into that kind of thing and high up, not the man on the street, you have to be careful of getting too technical. But there are many different kinds of Islam, as he said. Besides, we're talking about standard Orthodox Islam, but there are other folk Islam in many different countries which has brought in a lot of strange ideas, magic, superstition, sorcery, and many other things which we certainly don't have time to get into today. Okay, but You can ask him if he says the Bible's been corrupted, ask him when. When did it happen? Who did it? How? Okay, makes no sense. Number one, Muhammad asked his people to read the Bible and study the Scriptures, that they were supposed to study these books that had come from God. So you ask a Muslim, well, did it come then after Muhammad? And he might say, yeah, it came after Muhammad. After Muhammad, it was corrupted. Oh, so that's after 632, when Muhammad died. Well, any manuscript that's dated beyond 632, we consider very, very old manuscript as Christian. And our basic translation work and so forth is all done with manuscripts much earlier than that. So throw all those out if you want after Muhammad, and we'll just use these manuscripts from before Muhammad. How's that? Because those are the ones he said we should read that were good, okay? And then they might say, no, wait a minute. It was corrupted before Muhammad. Oh, okay, it was corrupted before Muhammad. Often they say at Nicaea. They all got together, they chose 4 Gospels and threw the other 100 in the lake. Threw them all away. Oh, well, that's very interesting. So the Christians all got together and decided on this, and they threw all the other ones away, and they chose Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Okay, fine. Well, let's look at these old manuscripts then and compare them to the Bible we have today and see where this change is. Oh, they agree. Oh, that's interesting. I guess it wasn't changed then, was it? Or you could ask them, well, who did this? Well, they say these people got together, they did this and that. Well, there was at that time, there was a little old lady who had a Bible in her home out in Damascus, in the back street, a little house up on the shelf. And these guys all got together there in Nicaea. That's fine. They made their decisions. But when they made that decision, it didn't magically all of a sudden change this book on the shelf on this lady's house. Do you mean to tell me that after they made this decision, they went all over the world and destroyed every Bible that was in existence prior to the time they made that decision? That's the only way that you would get rid of every Bible and be able to put forth your corrupt version, if you destroyed every other one that was in existence. Because it would only take one other Bible somewhere on somebody's shelf somewhere in some little village to wipe out your whole plan. And do you think that the Jews agreed to this as well? I mean, after all, we're being accused of not only changing the New Testament, but the Old Testament. Well, don't you think the Jews would have risen up in rage and whatever? Here we are changing their holy scriptures. What if we came in and tried to change your Quran? I said, this makes no sense. This whole theory makes no sense. Yeah, well, that's another issue. You bring that up. Okay? God is great. If God can protect the Quran, you mean he couldn't protect his Bible, but now he can protect the Quran? I mean, why don't you accept the Book of Mormon? I mean, they claim that, Joseph Smith is a prophet. They claim that he gave a book, and you claim we came this far. Why don't you go the next step? Maybe that's another prophet who's come. Maybe you're missing something too. We better check this out together. Maybe, we need to do something. And every argument they give you why you should move on to the Quran, you can use that same argument. They should move on to Mary Baker, Gloverson, Patterson, Eddy, and, the Christian Science, or to the Mormons, or to something else, whatever. Whoever other scripture comes you want to. Use the same argument. And every argument they use for why the Quran is the final revelation and Muhammad is the final revelation, because it says so, because it's right here, you can use that same argument to defend the New Testament. Well, it says so right here. And take your choice, folks. Pay your money and take your choice. They're all the same arguments.
Well, they say that the people at the council might see got together and ripped apart. It's not exactly what Muhammad did.
Well, yeah, that's the whole nother course, how the Quran was compiled. But when you read about the charges that the Muslims bring about to the Christians of how we corrupted our Bible and put it together by all these pieces and hearsay, folks, this is the exact history of how the Quran was put together. I mean, there were big arguments over the Quran. And one of the wives of Muhammad, actually in reading the Quran, said, wait a minute. There's whole things here I remember Muhammad said you left out. And other people came along and said, wait a minute. What is this thing, these verses doing in the Quran? That's a poem my uncle wrote. There's all kinds of stories that if you go back into looking at the history of Islam and the way, so they've got a lot of problems too. But unless you are into Arabic and things like that, try to stay away from the Quran because they'll run circles around you. I should introduce to you Carl Ellis. He's going to be our main speaker tonight, and he's working with a group called Project Joseph, which is a ministry directed primarily at African American Muslims in the United States, and it's great work. So if you have interest in that, talk to him today. He's got a paper out there too. Okay, quickly, we've already should have had two months on each of those two subjects. Now we got another one. It's another 2 months. Person of Jesus. Okay, Dr. Geisler's got a course. I don't know if it's this hour or later on today on Jesus Christ, the deity of Jesus Christ. We talked about that in the message this morning again. But this is the next big issue they're going to bring up. Obviously, they're talking about the Trinity. It comes up under that subject. Who is God? One God, three gods, so forth, all the prophets. So the subject of Jesus keeps coming up over and over again because it's a central issue, both to them and to us. And they will tell you that Jesus was a great man. He was a great prophet. He was the greatest of all the prophets before Muhammad. Jesus did many miracles, great miracles. Jesus was sinless. They'll tell you all the prophets were sinless. No big deal. Jesus was sinless. All the prophets were sinless. And you talk to them a little bit about, some of the problems of, Abraham lied or David was in adultery. Well, this was kind of before they were called to be a prophet. Or those were things that, in the old days, God kind of looked over, and Abraham sort of had to do that to save Sarah's life and so forth. They'll make up all kinds of excuses, little white lies and this kind of thing we talk about. Well, so if you try to talk to them about Jesus as God because he was sinless, that's not going to go a long way. All the prophets were sinless, even Muhammad, although he prayed for God to forgive his sins. They will even claim sometimes that he was sinless. And the Muslim will tell you, now look, we honor all the prophets. They believe in over 400 different prophets. And they will tell you that we honor all the prophets of the Old Testament, Jesus. Why don't you? We honor Jesus. We love Jesus. Why don't you love Muhammad? Why don't you honor him? Why won't you call him a prophet? And so this is one of the issues that they will bring up. They will claim to you that Jesus never called himself God directly. They will bring up to you the story of like the rich young ruler or the rich man who came to Jesus and said, "Good teacher," and raised a question to Jesus. And Jesus said, "Well, wait a minute, don't call me good. There's only one who's good, and that's God." And so obviously Jesus was saying he wasn't God. Well, that's not what Jesus was saying, but that's what they will tell you. And over again, they'll bring up things out of the Scriptures that their teachers have taught them in their schools. See, in Muslim countries, religion is part of the everyday education in their schools. They have religious classes. And where we were, at the beginning of the school year, every year they had their religious book, and their teacher would come in. They spent one day on Judaism. They spent one day on Christianity. And then all the rest of the school year on Islam. So you knew what they were getting about Christianity and about Judaism. Just a little bit of a harangue, and then all this stuff on Islam.
It's interesting how they use corrupted New Testament scriptures to make points and to defend themselves.
Yeah. When it's appropriate, they'll quote from the New Testament or the Old Testament, if they want to. And we do the same thing sometimes. We have to be careful. Sometimes we'll go to the Quran. And we'll point out some verse in the Quran and we'll say, well, look, right here in your Quran it says so and so and so and so and so. And, are we doing that because we accept the Quran as true? Well, be careful. We don't want to do anything and accuse them of doing something we might do ourselves. So, yes, sir.
One of the ways that the Muslims stack their books, if they have a bookshelf, they will put the most emphasis book put always the Quran on the top. But I find that on the second shelf always, over
Yeah.
Also, it's studied very much out of
Yeah, they'll have Bibles, and all the Islamic seminaries and schools and all order great quantities of the Bible from the Bible societies in the Middle East. And they're one of the biggest purchasers of Bibles in countries. Because they're studying it in order to attack it, though, and to point out what they consider errors or things that are changed or this or that or the other thing. So they're not studying it from a positive. But they'll have copies of the Bible, and they've heard about the Bible. And if you offer them a Bible, they'll often take it. You know? But it's true that they have such a high regard for the Quran as God's very word. I mean, not just teaching us, but dictated directly from God, syllable by syllable, word by word. And no other book can be on top of the Quran, or nothing else can ever be placed on the Quran. So it'll always be in a prominent place in the home, on a table, high up on a shelf, sometimes open on a little pedestal on a table, and they have a very high regard.
I don't know if you're going to get into this or not, but can you comment on
Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's do that. We'll talk about he was neither crucified. I'll just pull this back. You can see some of the other issues that we're not going to have time to get to in the next 2 minutes. Okay. The death and resurrection of Jesus. Big issue. Whole nother course again. Central to Christianity. Okay. Now, they'll say something like this usually. Standard thing. Okay, Jesus was arrested in the garden. Sometime between his arrest in the garden and his trial, God rescued him. He was such a great man. He was such a high prophet. It would be such an unjust thing to condemn him for something he didn't do. To punish one man for somebody else's sins is completely unjust. We don't do that in any of our courts, any of our cases. If you did the crime, you serve the time. If you did the crime, he doesn't serve the time. And, this is completely unjust to say that one man died for somebody else's sins or somebody else's things. So they'll bring that up. And they'll say that God rescued Jesus out and took him directly to heaven. Okay, you read about Enoch in the Old Testament and others taken to heaven. Well, the same thing happened again with Jesus. Well, then who died? Oh, well, probably Judas or someone else that God miraculously changed their appearance to look like Jesus. So all of these people thought that they were killing Jesus on the cross, but that really wasn't Jesus. That was somebody else. Jesus had been rescued and taken away. So obviously if Jesus didn't die on the cross, he didn't rise from the dead because he never died. Well, these are very interesting stories and ideas, and they will say, well, this person who died in the tomb, they usually come up with something like the swoon theory. You're familiar with that? That he didn't really die completely, he just kind of fainted, and then in the tomb, after a few days being there, it was cool, and he kind of got up and walked out, and whoever this person was then went back to whoever that person was. And this is kind of the stories that they've been taught, and they put together in much more detail than that, but that, it gives you the general idea. And, for Jesus to have died and been crucified on the cross would have great defeat for God. This was God's man. This was his teacher. This was his prophet. It would have been a great defeat. It would have been unjust. It would have been an insult. How could God do something like that? And they'll bring up all these kind of arguments and say these kind of things. And they'll even bring up a few scriptures and all. Jonah, Jesus said Jonah was a sign. Well, Jonah went into the whale alive. He came out of the whale alive. He didn't die. Okay, if Jesus, that was a sign of Jesus, then, look at Jesus. In alive, out alive. So they'll bring up all kinds of things like that. Well, you can study all that kind of thing in apologetics and all and see the ridiculousness of it. I mean, somebody went into that tomb, and the tomb is empty today, so where is that person? If it wasn't Jesus, somebody else